one of the things that has really helped me is that previous experience and then carrying over into local government is I'm able to communicate with folks across the counter and find some common ground, common understanding in looking at problem solving through the work that we do. And I look at this in parallel with my experience with the Yuma Valley Rod and Gun Club and our conservation, coupled with my 13+ years in hunter education with the Game and Fish Department as well as the advisory committee. I believe I can bring those same qualities to the commission and being able to have conversations across the counter and find those common solutions to the problems that we all face. For me, some of the biggest issues that we're going to be facing in the future are highlighted in my resume. Access and landowner relations is a huge aspect of what we're going to be doing, along with maintaining our opportunity to go into the wild and hunt, and Game and Fish maintaining their opportunity to manage wildlife. I believe this is only going to occur through communication and education with the constituency of the state of Arizona. Just kind of my thoughts in my opening statement. Once again, I appreciate this opportunity. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my opening statement. Happy to take any questions you have.
Great, thanks, Pat. We'll start off with Rich on this first set of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pat, thank you for coming back. I commend your assistance and interest in being on the commission. Could you elaborate? You alluded to it in your opening remarks. Can you tell us a little more elaboration what you believe be the two most important issues that will face the department in the next 5 years?
The two most important issues I think we're going to face in the next 5 years are going to be that access and landowner relations. I know the department has made great strides in furthering access to straight trust lands and getting some of the locks and stuff removed on some of the gates for that. And the second one I think that we're really going to face is their ability to manage wildlife into the future. Faced with some of the previous ballot initiatives trying to take that management authority away from Game and Fish, we want to make sure, it's really important that we make sure that wildlife is managed based on sound science. The ballot box is not the place for wildlife management. So those are, and I think the best way for us to do that is communication and education with the rest of Arizona. I honestly believe that there are, and I would expect that many of you do also, there are sportsmen and women who buy their license every year and still don't understand or fully buy into the mission of what the department is and what they do. And when you take that over to the John Q. Public side, it really brings, to me, it brings into perspective just how much communication and education we need to do with John Q. Public. And I know the commission has been working on a funding source for this and continues to work on that. There are some second comments on a proposal currently that I will be reviewing and commenting on when I get back to town.
Thank you. I have a follow-up.
Pat?
Mr. Chairman, fair chase along with the North American model for wildlife conservation should be the two backbone of hunting in our nation and state. Tell me why this statement is accurate and your views on these two items, fair chase and North American model.
Fair chase is a philosophy, in my opinion, of how we choose to pursue game. It speaks to the ethics and the honor of the hunt or the angler, whatever the case may be. It speaks to how game may be taken. Game is allowed to have the opportunity to flee. We're not taking game in fenced enclosures, those kinds of things. It's about respecting the game and the land on which the game resides. We are the stewards of the land and the wildlife. When sharing that over to the North American model, it's one of the founding principles, I believe, of the North American model. Fair chase is incorporated into that North American model. Management through sound science, opportunity for all, open development of laws, rules, and regulations, regulated commerce. All of those things roll in together, and basically it is the philosophy that we try and share through our hunter education courses and get young people to embrace going into the field.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Pat. Phil?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Morning, Pat, how are you today?
Good. Townsend, how are you?
Good. I'll go with my standard question, although you made another question in my mind earlier. But wildlife conservation in Arizona is not paid for by general tax dollars. How familiar are you with the department and commission's effort to generate discretionary revenue to keep up with the increases in wildlife management costs? And can you name any of these efforts?
Well, as previously mentioned, I know the commission is working on expanding some revenue opportunities for education and outreach. That's been in the works for a bit over a year now. They've also, it's been a little over a year now, they've introduced a conservation stamp or permit, which allows an individual to, you purchase that stamp or permit, and it gets you access to all of the conservation efforts without hunting and fishing. Those are the two that I'm probably the most familiar with.
Do you have any new ideas that you might bring to the table?
One of the things that was some of the controversy that was floating around last year had to do with trail cameras. And I think during our interview last year, I mentioned I would be supportive of a tag requirement for game cameras. I think that's another way the department can generate revenue for those kinds of things. I think we need to look at some certain conditions as far as research and schools, universities that are doing research in wildlife, especially in conjunction with the department, and kind of set those aside. But I think that's one other way that we could look at and generate some additional revenue through the department. There also could be a possibility to maybe some revisions to the bonus point program going forward that may have the possibility of generating some revenues.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, welcome back, Pat.
Thank you, Ms. Schultz.
As you're much familiar with in the Yuma area, there is a constant interplay between the role of the Game and Fish Commission in management of wildlife and the federal government's role that they have, and that interplay can cause some confliction, or it can cause overlapping claims of responsibility, and those are magnified, especially in an area like Yuma and along the southern border and along the eastern border of Arizona, and with multiple species. Can you comment on that interplay and how the Game and Fish Commission should approach maintaining its line of responsibility?
Thank you for that question, Ms. Chilton. I think the department's role in wildlife management is well-founded. I think the real question is who are the federal partners that they would be working with? There's two issues along the southern border. One, of course, is the border crossing issue, the illegal border crossing issue, and the other would be the U.S. Fish and Wildlife working in conjunction or partly with the department on the recovery of endangered species or the management of some of the wildlife refuges we have down there. One is probably a little easier for me to address than the other, in that one of the things that I would like to see change, maybe even more so to the endangered species side of things, I would like to see the state be the lead organization in management of wildlife throughout all of Arizona. I would like to see the federal government support the states with its goals, with funding and resources, But at the end of the day, it's the state of Arizona that would have say in the wildlife management and how it gets managed. When you look at the endangered species, once an endangered species is considered recovered, the federal folks hand off management of that wildlife back to the state. And to me, it doesn't, that's the wrong way to go about that process. It should be the state that's managing that to begin with federal money and resources supporting that. Board to issue is a little more complicated for me. There are two sides to that question. We know, of course, one, the immigration issue, and the second is the barrier that would be created for some wildlife to move back and forth across that border. Some of the natural migration or travel patterns could be or would be interrupted, specifically for large game species. So that one is that's a much more challenging question, I think, or problem to solve. We have partners already in Mexico with the recovery of pronghorn antelope, the Sonoran pronghorn antelope, and the Mexican gray wolf. I think those partnerships would have to be strengthened and maybe sharing some of the resources back and forth in order to solve that side of the issue.
Thank you very much. I don't at the moment have a follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning, Pat. I appreciate you coming in and reapplying this year.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly.
The first question I have for you, do you feel having an education and public relations program for the public so they understand who and how we manage wildlife is important?
I do. I do advocate that an education program is most important for the department going forward. And I look at this, I see this in our interaction with hunter education. When we're talking with folks, we bring them into a class and we start explaining how Game and Fish Funds gets its money. Where does that money come from? When we start talking about, holy smoke, the brain just left me. When we start talking about habitat management, those kinds of things, a lot of people are surprised to learn what the role of the department is. And that's really the biggest reason why I advocate for an expanded education program. To my knowledge, the only time the department has a captive audience that they can sit down and explain what their mission truly is through that hunter education course. It's the only opportunity we have to sit down and share with the individuals there what they are and what they do.
Thanks, Pat. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Rich?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pat, what is the R3 movement and why is it important to the future of the Arizona Game and Fish Department?
I'm sorry, Mr. Williams, could you
What is the, excuse me, what is the R3 movement and why is it important to the future of the Arizona Game and Fish Department?
The R3 movement stands for Recruitment, Retention, and Reactivation. The recruitment side of that is looking to bring in those new hunters into the program. Part of what Game and Fish is looking to do is establish a new client base going forward. That's the recruitment side of that. The reactivation is trying to re-engage previous hunters or anglers and to getting them back into the field so that they can become a part of things. In many cases, I know for me, some of the hunting and angling that I love to do most kind of get put on the side burner with family and children coming up. So that reactivation part of that is a component of that. And retention, we've got to hang on to the folks that we have. One of the challenges I think that we have is a lot of people get discouraged with not being able to obtain certain big game tags over a given period of time. I'm not one of those. I understand it's a lottery system and it is what it is, but there are those who get discouraged and lose hope that they'll acquire that tag or whatever it is. That's to me, is we've got to figure out a way that we can shorten some of those wait times maybe, and provide some different opportunities for those who would like to go into the field. So that's how I see the R3 movement.
Thank you. Appreciate the answer.
Any follow-up, Rich?
No, I haven't.
Okay, thank you. Pat?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Mr. Madden.
A major key to having an effective 5-member commission is having every member attend and participate in commission meetings. Given your current occupation and other obligations, are you able to fulfill this tremendous commitment of time to serve as a commissioner? And please elaborate.
Mr. Madden, thank you for that question. One of the things that I made sure I did before submitting my application and resume request seeking appointment to the commission was a memorandum up the ladder to my director, seeking his approval to apply for the commission and identifying what that would include, the 5-year commitment that would include. He then forwarded that up the ladder to the county administrator. I got a response from my director back and ultimately approval from the county administrator 10 minutes later. So I am very fortunate, I consider myself very fortunate to have the support of my immediate director and the county administrator going forward. I have the ability and the desire to complete this task if so fortunate to be selected.
Thank you. No, excuse me. Thank you. No follow-up.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Phil?
I think Pat's answered the questions I had written down, so I don't have a follow-up question. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to Sue.
Actually, I believe you have also addressed mine. I think you've been concise, but you've hit a lot of points. So we just thank you for being here.
Thank you, ma'am.
I think, Pat, what I wanted to ask you, because you've got that 13 years of experience as a hunter safety educator, instructor. I have so many son-in-laws, nephews, friends that I've met through the hunting community that want to get their kids involved in hunting, and the common complaint I keep hearing from all of them is there aren't enough hunter safety courses out there. I understand the online course is readily available, but it seems like the field days on Saturday are few and far between. If you were appointed as our next commissioner, do you got any plans on how we may be able to expand that program and make it more available to our youth that we're working so hard to recruit?
Some of the things, Mr. Kelly, that the advisory committee has been talking about is exactly that. The majority of the problems that we have as far as classrooms or field days exist predominantly up here in the Metro Phoenix area and the limited availability of shooting ranges. And secondary, it kind of spills over into some of the Tucson area and up into Flagstaff a little bit. But predominantly the problem lies here. So there's a couple of options that the committee has talked about, and we've opened up several different options in the hope of moving adults out of the classroom. And that was the purpose for generating the bonus point field day, which is just a 1-hour class for the adults. You need to be 18 years of age and 3 years of verifiable hunting experience. You take the online course, you go do a 1-hour field day, in which basically all you have to do is then follow the instructions that you're given and you will pass. The online field day is the second easiest or friendliest system. That typically includes a 4-hour field day, and it's a little bit longer to get through, just because you are actually handling a firearm a little bit more. There's some tracking and trailing exercises that are included, and it's just a little more involved. There has been some discussion about moving the adults completely out of the classroom setting. I'm concerned about this in only one element. It's not the single parents or the single adults that I'm worried about. I do not want to separate those family units. If you're coming in with your kids to take hunter education, we've got to figure out a way If there's a different supplement that we need to get you so that you qualify for whatever that is, we've got to figure that out. And these are just in the early conversation stages right now. So, but that's one of the things that I am really concerned about. If you're bringing your family in and you're going to take Hunter Education as a unit, we've got to be able to take that family unit in and move them through the course.
Great. Thanks, Pat. I appreciate that. Has anybody else on the board got any more questions for Pat? Okay. If we could get a couple-minute closing statement from you, Pat?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, once again, I want to thank you for this opportunity. It's truly honoring and humbling that you would accept my application and resume and choose to interview me going forward for this position. I appreciate your service to the department and to the state of Arizona. And as we've mentioned throughout these conversations, I really believe education is the key going forward for the department and teaching the citizens, letting the citizens of Arizona know who they are and who they work for and what they do. Thank you again.
Thanks, Pat. Appreciate your time. Our last applicant this morning is Kathy Scott, and I did want to mention briefly, somebody turned in a blue slip a little bit late, but we'd like to still hear from them. So following the last interview with Kathy, we will let that person come up and speak. So we got Kathy Scott ready to go.
Somebody want to help? I think the officers have that together.
Thank you. Morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to your interview. What we'll do is have you take about 2 or 3 minutes, Kathy, and give us some opening comments. And then we've got a series of 2 questions from each board member that we'll run through. And then at the conclusion, we'll give you a couple more minutes to wrap things up. But it takes about 30 minutes. So
Okay, thank you. And I'm not here under subterfuge. My name is Kathy Scott, but I go by Kate. And so when you saw my resume, it says Kate at the top. So
Thank
I
you.
am the same person. So good morning, Chairman Kelly and board members. And I thank you for the opportunity to be interviewed for the Arizona Game and Fish Commissioner vacancy in Cochise County. I'm deeply honored, humbled, and grateful to have been invited here today. Home for my husband Tony and I for 20 years has been a little slice of heaven called Birdland Ranch, formerly known as the Page Ranch, Arizona, Topo Map, Grid 73. We like maps. The 160-acre ranch is at an elevation of 5325 and is an in-holding within the Coronado National Forest on the western slopes of the Huachuca Mountains with Madre and pine oak woodlands. Our journey of wildlife habitat restoration and enhancement of our ranch began in spotting Asian and western bluebirds at our bird bath. After restoring the ranch house, which needed considerable repair, we installed 4 nest boxes and joined Cornell Lab of Ornithology's Nest Box Network to share our citizen science cavity nesting species data. Funding under Arizona Game and Fish Landowner Incentive Program with the Conservation Stewardship Coordinator provided a whole lot more boxes and native seed for land imprinting, dry method seeding of an eroded grassland and creation of 2 earthen ponds. A nice, well-meaning ranching neighbor collected the native grass seed, which at the time they weren't selling this really locally. And so there's a whole gamut: blue side oats and Rothrock grama, Blaine's love grass, sand drop, alkali, saccaton, wonderful. And wood sorrel, oxalis, and cypress sedge was hand-seeded to help the grassland birds, our Mearns quail and our scaled quails. But my mechanical engineering background provides a foundation for problem solving and exploring new challenges and opportunities, as an engineering foundation shapes how you look at the world. think flowcharts, which only came about after I received an ROTC scholarship, and I was able to go to Clarkson University in Potsdam, New York. I worked as one of the first female manufacturing engineers at Xerox, and weekends as an Army Reservist officer in the Engineering Corps, provided me with vast, innumerable experiences I utilize to this day. And yes, I did jump out of a perfectly good airplane at airborne school. But living close to the land in Arizona, animals have always seemed to be my present best teachers, with my dachshund being the main instigator for where I am today. And one fine spring morning, Javelina had come nose to nose with her, and after the ordeal, it triggered my desire to become a vet tech and to eventually work in wildlife rehabilitation, which animal emergency medicine provided a great deal. And 18 years later, I'm happy to say we have other dachshunds, but we've fenced in our area, and we've since had no other native wildlife encounters. In 2013, we were with Fish and Wildlife Partners for Fish and Wildlife Funding, and we continued our wildlife habitat and restoration, completing the work this last spring. And our woodlands were carefully cleared. We didn't use the big grinder kind of machine that comes in. I kind of forget the name of that. He wasn't available anyway, but we carefully went through with the crews and watched out for grassland plants and cacti and other things while they thinned it. And today the rancher that we share our ranch with, who runs cows on our property periodically throughout the year, they've seen the range has been greatly restored with the grasses. The activity in the cavity nesting species has gone through the roof with the azure bluebirds, which Game and Fish has been saying that's a species of greatest conservation need. So it's been a win-win for all. And then continued work with the Tucson Wildlife Center provided me that final leg up to become a wildlife rehabilitator, which I'm working on getting that my wildlife rehab and flight enclosure completed. And it also, through working at the Tucson Wildlife Center, I had to work under a licensed rehabber, and that empowered me to set up my nonprofit and gain additional grant monies and open me up to other partnerships within my community. Because I'm a team player, I like to bring a lot of people to the table and get a lot of different ideas before I go headlong. Sometimes I still go headlong. So we've gained considerable altitude with that. And this year was also a year that wildlife advocacy came into the fold, and I was presenting to Game and Fish in support of establishing the rule they did to end wildlife killing contests, which I was very pleased and proud that that ruling took effect this month. And as is stated under the Arizona's core concepts, one of those concepts, hunting and angling laws are created through public process, and that was beautiful to see us all come together and make this happen, because everyone has the opportunity to shape the laws and regulations applied in wildlife conservation. So with that, I thank you for your time and as I said, the opportunity to be here. I have to keep taking my glasses on and off, sorry, but a little blind in my old age.
Thanks, Kate. We'll start off our roundup of questions with Pat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Fair chase, along with the North American model for wildlife conservation, should be the two backbones of hunting in our nation and state. Tell me why this statement is accurate and your views of these two items, fair chase and the North American model.
I believe it's very key in order to have a vibrant hunting culture to have a set of tenets that guide those people, just like we have a stoplight and we have our laws that regulate civil society. And thank you, Teddy Roosevelt, and the people that worked with him to set that up. Of the 7, I don't need to probably go through all of them for you, but I think it helps shape hunters that are initially getting into it and need to find out how to go about it. And when I was looking through the hunting regulation, which I do all the time anyway, but I thought that it was laid out very clearly. I mean, there's 4 pages that goes into the ethics and the backbone of why this is why we do what we do and how we do it. So ethics and a high sense of good conduct within the field. And fair chase, that's to me just in this, when you hunting, I have a few family members that were, took me on a couple of hunts. It was mostly geese and the duck field of it, but the one-on-one with the animal, that's, you want to make sure that you're truly hunting from where the classic tenets of it was formed. So I think it can't be stated enough, but it's done very well in the guides. So I answered your question. I do tend to ramble.
Any follow-up for Kate? Pat?
No follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
Phil?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here today. So we appreciate your efforts at wildlife conservation on your farm, on your ranch. As you know, in Arizona, wildlife conservation is not paid for by the general tax dollars. How familiar are you with the department and commission's efforts to generate discretionary revenue and to keep up with the increases in wildlife management costs? And can you name any of these efforts?
You mean specifically in the Arizona Heritage Fund, where they allocate fundings for improving land and water resources, or is it the non-game landowner incentive programs? And
How does the department gain its revenue?
oh, well, you get it through your hunting and the fishing licenses, the motor fuel, there's some other ones in there. Pretty much hunting, primarily hunting and fishing license. So the excise taxes of gun sales too, you get that with the equipment. Yeah,
Thank you.
sorry.
Any follow-up, Phil?
No, not at this time.
Ms. Chilton?
Thank you very much, and thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Ms. Chilton. Mrs. Chilton.
We also enjoy seeing the birds on our ranch. In the state of Arizona, because so much of the land is not private land, it's often designated for various federal accomplishments, very goals that the federal government has. Can you discuss the interplay between the management of species authority of the state and that of the federal government in Arizona?
Are you speaking to the Endangered Species Act?
Well, that is part of the picture, of course.
Mhm. And how the...
It is not the whole picture. but,
Right,
you know,
exactly.
the two have management for different aspects of wildlife. And just discuss those, please.
Having access to state land. Well, it's key, and I think you bring it out in your landowner relations program brochure too. I had never seen one of those done in my office yet. I think they've been out of them. But it goes into great detail how the interplay can help with both sides, coming in and working with the landowner, making sure the land is respected when the hunters are there, and the other kinds of dynamics that happen to a landowner. I know I've had a lot go on in the last 20 years. We've been there with just a lot of different visitors, shall we say, coming over, and so you're having the game and fish helping with that. I don't know if I've addressed it quite clearly, but if I haven't, just maybe ask me another question. But that's, I don't, and what I would underscore is what I don't bring to the answer right at this moment, I would do a lot of research and come to all the dimensions that would come to play, which I brought out in my past with my engineering degree. What I didn't know, my teachers always told me, well, there's all kinds of ways, and you go out and you find the answers, and you bring it to the fore, you talk to people, you interact with experts that have been doing this kind of work. So what I haven't got as answers, I could always find out and bring to the table.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any follow-up, Sue? Okay. Kate, my question for you this morning, do you feel having an education and public relations program for the public so they understand who and how we manage wildlife is important?
Oh, yes, and in relation to the recent coyote attacks in Scottsdale, I think that underscores it very powerfully, that no matter what, all the brochures in the world, which I hand out repeatedly at birding festivals and other festivals, people need to have those programs of knowledge, of passing on education of all the different aspects of living with their wild neighbors. So I think that one of the goals I would bring, what I would like to see brought out is more public, a person speaking to in public programs like Mark Hart does every year at Southwest Wings, and it's very well attended. And I think, oh, you could have that with being coyote aware and different aspects of it besides the brochures, because there's nothing like getting the interaction with the expert.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Rich?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kate, thanks for being here today. Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
interest. Kate, can you tell me what the R3 movement is and why it is important to the future of the Arizona Game and Fish Department?
The R3 movement.
Yes.
No, I'm afraid I don't, sir. I don't know what that is.
Thank you.
As I said, I would find it out.
Thanks, Rich. Pat?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A major key to having an effective 5-member commission is having every member attend and participate in meetings. Given your current occupation and obligations, are you able to fulfill this tremendous commitment of time to serve as a commissioner? And please elaborate.
Yes, I do. I have a very good team of people that are waiting for me in the wings. As I said, I don't have right now the organization that we've established is myself and my husband, and it's mostly in the education aspect of it. That was the main platform for beginning the nonprofit, is education, because knowledge is power, and I found there was just a huge disconnect between people of understanding how to live with their wild neighbors effectively without a lot of problems. So I feel that I can definitely take on the responsibility and the time commitment, because it's at this point I dictate it, and it's not like I have to answer to a lot of people, which makes me really a fast mover. I can cover a lot of ground, I can tell you that. So I would welcome the opportunity to dive in and be very much a part of it. I like public speaking. I like being out in the public and sharing information and bringing hopefully a new dynamic, possibly, just because I'm, who I am, I guess. So thank you for that question, but I'm more than ready for the challenge.
Thank you, Kate. No follow-ups.
Thanks, Pat. Phil?
Yes, you've really talked a lot about this, but as you know, Arizona's become a much more urban state, and you live in a very rural part of Arizona. But a part of being an urban state is we have fewer and fewer, as a percentage, people looking to outdoor activities, whether it's hunting, fishing, birding, those type of activities. It sounds like your wildlife center is a very productive and nice place to visit. I hope sometime to get down there.
Party.
Okay, but as with that, and I assume part of what you do with your wildlife center is public education, is how do we reach those people and bring them into understanding the outdoors and the interaction with wildlife and the beauty of it?
Again, I know I might sound like a broken record, but maybe additional tools I could bring into. I had noticed the duck stamp, and back for a little while I had managed the Sonoyta Inn in Sonoyta, and I had the pleasure of meeting the CEO of Ducks Unlimited, and he was sharing a lot of interesting insights. And I'm wondering if in May, given the birding population of people visiting and the activity it generates in different parts of our state with the different festivals. We could possibly consider thinking about a different stamp that would highlight a different species, and doesn't have to be avian, it could be anything else. And encouraging finding out about that. Then I guess I'm diverting into funding with that, but with that interest in wildlife, you will get possible people that will get more involved, even though it does show that we do get a pretty high percentage of people. I have a study that was conducted that we do have a fair amount, but because people living in the urban areas need it. I mean, all the hunters and the people that come down to our neck of the woods are generally from Tucson or Phoenix. I think it's again, just getting out and speaking to people about it and showing them all the diversity of species we have in the state that we're so blessed with. There's no other state in the lower 48 that has the diversity we have. So just sharing all that, and then their awareness is peaked. I know I drive into my Safeway and there's all that bird there. Oh, there's, they understand. They start seeing the lizards, and then that grows into maybe they want to go out and fish, because I do like to fish at Parker Canyon. It just, one little step leads to another. That's why when I talked about how the bluebirds inspired my husband and I, you just see that and you go, oh, and so the inquisitiveness. Working with children, I've taught a lot of middle schoolers about our wildlife, and then they go home and they talk to their parents and they drag them to some of my workshops. But I get the best fun with the children, because then they get all excited and then they run around and share that, and that can bring about some new light bulbs going off. It's, I think, just engaging the public all the time, and just with more of a, it's done very well. And as I said, I love all the beautiful educational brochures and the website, but people are always like, they don't seem to go to, they don't understand the diversity within the Game and Fish Agency of all the information that's available to them. They don't. Like I'll say, well, I'll hand them a pamphlet, and they'll say, oh, that's from Game and Fish. They might be going to other organizations that don't have quite the right depth to talking about the species. So I have a big notebook of when I went to a really great program that Lacana de Sousa of our region was running with Pima Parks. And they gave me this three-wing binder of all the different species, and I just use it all the time. So that was a good resource. There again, I'm probably over-answering your question, but I just think that it takes conversation and maybe a little bit of freshening up, maybe making a part of the website have a little social media aspect to it, where things are more dynamic, that they are refreshed a little more often. I know I have to do that with my nonprofit. The only reason I'm kind of on Facebook sometimes is you have to engage that, so that might be another avenue too, especially with the millennials. They're just all about Instagram. So as I talk to them and ask them to help me with my cell phone problems all the time. But I do appreciate it, because I think what you don't understand, you get alienated from, and you get into these bubbles with technology where you have to say, I'm just going out, and you can, and then have that experience. So,
Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Ms. Chilton?
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here and
Well, thank
answering
you.
these questions. I'm going to be a little more specific on the first one that I asked.
Okay, maybe I
Okay.
understand.
How do you feel that federal designations like wildlife refuges, primitive areas, conservation areas, and et cetera, affect access for management of wildlife?
Oh, well, there's a protocol and they have to follow, I'm sure, so they don't incur any damage to that refuge. But I think it works to our benefit to keep how it was set up intact, and I guess it's a question maybe I'm not quite understanding in its full breadth, but it does affect how one conducts themselves when they're doing a survey, and what you can't cut down, or what you can't, which is why when we did our wildlife habitat program, we did it very carefully with the hand wave. So it takes more time and money, and I get that. But in the end, if you're following the well thought out protocol that was set up for it, and I think just working as cooperatively as we can, and even though it's, because I understand how that can be expensive, and working that out, but
Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Yeah, I think we've got time for about one more question, so I'm going to let Rich go. Finish it
I
up.
have no further questions.
I just wore you out.
Any other board members have any questions for Kate? Okay, Kate, if we could just get a 1 or 2 minute wrap up
sure.
from you?
I'll go easy on you. Well, as I began my opening statement with, I just want to repeat that I would be honored and humbled to serve on the commission, and I would bring my considerable energy, as I was telling Pat. I can be a little bit of an energizer bunny. Diverse experience, enthusiasm, team spirit, camaraderie, passion, inquisitiveness, resourcefulness, very resourceful, I have to tell you, and thoughtfulness, as well as using all that is available to draw from to conserve, enhance, and preserve our incredible wildlife heritage that we need to be cognizant of for current and future generations. And I just want you to know that I'm a person who cares about the land and the wildlife, and I would work very hard, and I would welcome the opportunity to shape the decisions for future management of our wildlife. And I thank you very much for being able to be here.
Thanks, Kate. We appreciate you coming up to speak with us today. Good luck. Okay, with the conclusion of our interviews, we'll go ahead and entertain the one blue speaker's card. Sandy Barr from the Sierra Club Grand Canyon chapter has filled one out. Morning, Sandy. Welcome. Good morning.
Can't hear you. Worse.
Hold on, you got somebody coming.
Help is coming.
Oh, there, okay.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm Sandy Barr, I'm the chapter director for Sierra Club's Grand Canyon chapter, and that's the Arizona chapter. And I have been coming to these meetings since this board was created. And I filled out the blue slip because I was really concerned about the lack of notice on the first meeting. I came today thinking there had been no first meeting. I was wondering how you arrived at the people you were going to interview. I found no notice of the meeting on the governor's board site, and where we normally would find the notices on the Arizona Game and Fish webpage, they were not there either. I did not get any kinds of emails as I had in the past about the meetings, and so I'm been assured that they were all posted, but I did want to indicate that I think it does violate the spirit of the open meeting law to do things one way and then shift how they're done without providing the public with proper notice on that. We try to serve a bit of a watchdog role with both this board and the commission, and the only way we can do that is if we know about it, because these meetings aren't like webcast or anything either. So I wanted to express concerns about that, and also encourage you to make it clear about how you're going to do things, where we can find things. If we have to check, I've had to do this before with certain boards and commissions. If I have to check, every day to see if something's been posted, I will do that. I'll put it on my calendar, but I need to know that that is the case. I really feel like, that, we missed an opportunity to be here to hear about how the process would go forward, and also how you arrived at interviewing the folks that you interviewed today. And so I just wanted to encourage you to think about a process that is more inclusive of all the public, and providing us all an opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments, Sandy. We appreciate it. Okay, Amelia, don't you think we can move on to voting for the candidates?
Mr. Chairman, absolutely.
Okay, is everybody on the board clear? Sue did a pretty concise explanation when we first got started, so if there aren't any questions, let's go ahead and cast our votes and let Amelia tally them up when we're done.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Tobin?
what should we write them on to, right on this form? All right.
Yeah, it looks like the right-hand column where it says points
Yes,
awarded.
okay.
Yeah. And we'll each be doing a maximum of 20 each, and you can vote up to 8 max per applicant.
And Mr. Chairman, that there's no obligation to award all 20.
Correct. Yes, please.
Exactly so. He's the pros, the best I've ever seen. I've been on a lot of commissions by far. Somebody that won't be in his home. No more Gerard. sense, is correct, because he's